The first thing she did wrong wasn't handing me the divorce papers. It was leaving them in a manila folder labeled Quarterly Budget Review. See, Caroline forgot something important. She trained me to notice details. When you've spent a decade with someone who color codes her sock drawer and triple checks thermostat settings like it's a hostage negotiation, a misfiled folder screams louder than any affair ever could. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit there on my desk, next to the Q3 reports she thought I'd be too tired to double-check. The label was too perfect. Her handwriting, always aggressive in the R.S., like she was stabbing the paper, had this fake calm to it. Like she practiced it. That was my first clue. People don't rehearse love letters. They rehearse exits. When I finally opened it, it wasn't shock that hit me. It was relief. I didn't have to guess anymore. I didn't have to smile through another dinner while she recounted how Tony from the gym is just so funny. I didn't have to play dumb every time she missed her train and got home smelling like men's cologne and cinnamon gum. No, what hit me wasn't grief. It was clarity. She wrote it like a performance piece. David, I've tried. I've really, really tried. But we've grown apart, and I've realized I need more from life. More passion, more energy, more unpredictability. Unpredictability. That was rich coming from a woman who scheduled intimacy like it was a board meeting. I reread it twice. Then once more, upside down. Not because I didn't understand, because I wanted to feel something. Anything. But my emotional response was dead on arrival. What I did feel, though, was strategy clicking into place like chess pieces. Because that prenup she pretended didn't exist, the one she scoffed at 10 years ago while calling me paranoid. It was ironclad. My brother-in-law, Ron, drew it up. Ron doesn't do soft. Still, I played my part. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. Made sure the paper corners aligned. Then I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of her favorite overpriced mineral water, and waited. I didn't ask her about the folder. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't ask who the excitement was. That's how you bait a trap. You make them think it's their idea to walk in. She got home around 9:42 p.m., humming. That was new. She only hummed when she felt like she'd won something. She kicked off her shoes at the doorway like a woman who had finally outgrown the cage she thought I built for her. She walked past me like I was part of the furniture and grabbed a spoon from the drawer without looking. I left something for you, she said over her shoulder. You'll probably want to get a lawyer. I sipped my water. Is this about the budget review? She turned around, her face flickering. Just a moment. Between confusion and irritation. She wanted a reaction. A shout, a panicked something. I gave her none of it. I blinked slowly and sipped again. You knew? I read the folder label. Quarterlies are due in 2 weeks, not this Friday. Amateur move. That stung her a bit. I saw it in the way her lips tightened. She opened her mouth like she was about to perform her monologue. How she's done being neglected. How I'm a husk of a man. How she met someone who made her feel alive again. But I cut her off before she could hit her rhythm. So who is it? I asked. Not a name. Give me a category. Personal trainer? Some divorced hedge fund guy doing jujitsu to avoid therapy? Or, wait, please tell me it's Tony from the gym. That would complete the bingo card beautifully. Her cheeks flushed. You think this is a joke? This is my life. And it's about to get very, very real. She scoffed. Actually scoffed. You're always so calculated. That's why I'm done. You have no fire. No edge. You just exist. I nodded slowly, the smirk involuntary at this point. No edge, huh? That's interesting. Let me guess. He writes poetry on his phone notes app and wears necklaces made of shark teeth. Super edgy. You don't get it. She snapped, grabbing her bag. I want someone who actually feels something. I stood up, walked to the counter, and laid her folder gently on top. You'll feel something soon enough. But not the way you expect. She frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said, walking past her and toward my office, next time you hand a man a loaded document, don't forget to read the part about consequences. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of pain. Because the timing had to be perfect. Ron always told me, don't go for revenge when you're angry. Go when they think they've won. And Caroline, she thought she was already celebrating. That was her final mistake. 3 days. I gave her 3 days. Not to come crawling back. No, that was never part of the equation, but to let her soak in the illusion of freedom. The new chapter glow. The post-slam door euphoria. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't even acknowledge her existence. I let her think she'd finally escaped the prison she built in her head and labeled me. Meanwhile, I was rereading our prenup. Not because I had doubts, but because I enjoy precision. Every clause was a blade, every paragraph a loaded chamber. Caroline signed that thing in a flurry of Pinterest wedding planning and Prosecco tastings, never once questioning why a software consultant would use a litigation bulldog like Ron. I told her back then it was just paperwork. She giggled and said, as long as we never need it. Fast forward. She needs it. But here's the twist. I didn't enforce it yet. I let her think she had the upper hand. See, power isn't in possession, it's in restraint. On the fourth day, she broke the silence. A text. Can we talk like adults? The arrogance. As if she was the rational one. As if she didn't just detonate a decade of shared life with a smile and a quote from some therapist's Instagram. I replied, absolutely. I'll bring coffee. You bring answers. We met at a neutral cafe. The kind with artisanal pastries and ceramic cups that cost more than my first bike. She showed up dressed like a politician's mistress, understated but expensive. Not the Caroline I married, who once bragged about thrifting her whole wardrobe and thought luxury brands were a scam. She sat across from me, back straight, phone screen down on the table, classic tell. That phone was either still buzzing with him, or she'd muted it to avoid the guilt tremors. I didn't expect you to take it so well, she said. No yelling, no begging. You've been very composed. I had time to practice, I replied. Started rehearsing the night. You came home with hotel shampoo in your purse. Her eyes darted, just for a second. Excuse me. Fairmont, I said, sipping my drink. Lemon verbena. You've never stayed there, but someone did. And you clearly brought home a souvenir. Her fingers tightened slightly around the mug. Are you tracking me? No, but you're not as subtle as you think. You know who taught me to notice things? You did. Every time you accused me of zoning out while you talked, I was watching, processing, cataloging. I didn't come here to be interrogated. Good. Because this isn't an interrogation. It's a courtesy. She leaned in, voice low. A courtesy for what? I pulled a small envelope from my coat pocket and placed it on the table between us. This, I said, is the preliminary filing to enforce the prenup. Filed yesterday. You'll receive a formal copy through your lawyer, if you have one. She didn't touch the envelope. You're really going to do this? You're the one who said I was boring, I replied, smiling. So here's your excitement. You're punishing me for leaving. No, Caroline. I'm rewarding you. You want it out? You've got it. No alimony, no assets, and no access to anything you didn't bring in. Which, if memory serves, was a 2007 Honda and student loan debt. She sat back, blinking. I saw it. The split second where confidence gave way to calculation. She was trying to decide if she should backpedal, feign regret, cry, seduce, or threaten. That's the carousel of tactics when their narrative breaks. It's not emotion, it's strategy. Then came her move. I made mistakes, she said softly. But you shut me out long before this. Maybe if you had shown this much energy in our marriage. I raised a hand. No, I said. You don't get to rewrite this script. You don't get to paint yourself as the lonely wife driven to seek excitement. You weren't lonely. You were bored. And bored people make stupid decisions. I thought you loved me. I leaned in, voice cold. I did. Enough to build a life. Enough to forgive. Once. Maybe even twice. But love doesn't survive contempt. And Caroline, you contempt me. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Just that tight little jaw twitch she gets when cornered. I stood up. Enjoy your new life, I said, picking up my coat. But just know, if you come knocking later, it won't be me who answers. As I walked out, I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. That would come later. This was just the prelude. Because I wasn't done. She thought the prenup was the trap. She hadn't even seen the real one yet. The thing about Caroline is, she always assumed the spotlight belonged to her. Even when she was the one walking out, tearing down what we built, she imagined I'd keep orbiting her like some sad satellite. burning up quietly in her gravitational pull. But she didn't know the version of me that stopped loving her. That version was quiet, yes. But he didn't orbit. He detonated. After that cafe meeting, I gave her space. Not because I owed her any, but because I wanted to see what she'd do with it. Predictably, she mistook silence for weakness. I'd enforced the prenup, but I hadn't touched the other accounts yet. The ones she didn't know I knew about. See, 2 years ago, I discovered an odd little charge from an art gallery downtown. Caroline's never been into art, unless you count inspirational wall quotes in cursive script. But there it was. A $5,200 retreat piece, she called it, when I asked. Retreat piece, my ass. So I followed the breadcrumbs. Quietly, systematically. She'd opened an LLC under her maiden name 6 months prior. Clara Monroe Wellness Consulting. Officially, it was a wellness brand. Unofficially, it was a siphon. She'd been transferring small amounts monthly from our joint investments, amounts just small enough to stay under the flags. Like I said, she trained me to notice details. That LLC funded her freedom, the hotel getaways, the hot yoga weekends, the 3-night stay at the Fairmont where she probably recited her monologue to that man before she tested it on me. But here's the beautiful part. Because she used marital assets to fund it without disclosure, it breached Clause 17B of the prenup. Undisclosed redirection of joint resources for personal enterprise without spousal notification nullifies spousal claim to revenue, gains, in said enterprise. Translation: I now own Clara Monroe Wellness Consulting. She'd built herself a cute little raft to float away from our marriage. I just drilled holes in it, quietly, legally, smiling. Ron confirmed it in writing. David, he said over lunch, she's clever. But she played the long con like it was a weekend getaway. You've got her boxed in 6 ways from Sunday. I nodded and stirred my coffee. I'm not ready to strike yet. Ron smirked. You're a scary man when you're patient. I wasn't being patient. I was being surgical. A week passed before she reached out again. A phone call this time. Straight to voicemail. Her message was short. You're not answering. I need to see you. It's important. The tone was wrong. Not angry. Not seductive. Unsteady. That was new. I waited another 24 hours. Then I texted her. You still at the loft? She responded within seconds. Yes. Please. Can you come now? Of course I could. And I did. But not alone. I brought a flash drive. On it, screenshots of her LLC bank records, a notarized transfer of ownership, and a surprise audit notice filed through Ron's firm under my name as a minority investor. Oh, and the LLC's tax filings for the last year, which I'd pulled under discovery rights. Turns out Caroline wasn't just emotionally reckless. She was fiscally sloppy too. When I walked into the loft, she looked like she hadn't slept. No makeup, hoodie, socks. The kind of Caroline only I used to see years ago before the curated version took over. I didn't know who else to call, she said, her voice cracking. I sat down on the edge of the chair she never liked. What's the emergency? Her hands trembled. There's something wrong with the business. My account got locked. I tried calling the bank, and they said, she paused, breath catching. They said the ownership name had changed. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, held it up like a magician revealing a card. They're right. I own Clara Monroe now. She froze, stared at me like I was speaking Portuguese. You can't, she said flatly. That's mine. No, I replied, calm and clean. It was yours. You built it using joint assets without disclosure. That voids your rights. Ron confirmed it. Twice. With footnotes. You're ruining me. No, I said. You did that the minute you underestimated me. She stood up abruptly. So this was your plan? Humiliate me? Strip everything away. I looked around the loft. Every plant, every painting, every artisanal throw pillow she'd curated to match her new identity. I'm not humiliating you, Caroline. I'm just removing the mask. The you built on my dime doesn't exist anymore. Welcome back. She took a shaky step forward. You're not like this. You're not cruel. I'm not. I stood. But I am done playing the dull husband you thought was too passive to see what was coming. Her mouth opened, a tremble in her voice. You're really going through with this? I already did. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, And that wellness conference you scheduled next month in Denver? I canceled it. You'll need my signature to reschedule. Legally, I'm now your business partner. I didn't wait for her to respond. I closed the door on whatever sound came out of her mouth. Outside, I didn't smile. I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because this was still foreplay. The real collapse hadn't even begun. I expected her to retaliate. Cry. Scream. Lawyer up. Something. But for the next 3 days, a radio silence. Which told me 2 things. 1, she was scrambling. 2, she wasn't done underestimating me. On day 4, it came. A letter. Hand-delivered. Not by courier. No. By her. I was in my home office when I heard the door chime. I checked the camera feed out of reflex, and there she was, Caroline, standing there in a raincoat like she was auditioning for some noir film. No umbrella. Just holding a beige envelope. Her armor was slipping. That look, half brave, half beaten, told me this wasn't an attack. It was a gamble. I opened the door. Didn't invite her in. She held the envelope out like it was a peace offering. Just read it, she said, already turning to walk away. You can call me after. She didn't wait for a reply. Smart. She knew silence was more terrifying than any insult I could throw. I closed the door and took the envelope to the kitchen. No return address. No perfume. Just one sheet. Typed. The letter didn't beg. It didn't apologize. It offered a deal. David, I know you think you're teaching me a lesson. Maybe you are. But I also know you didn't do all this just to hurt me. You're too calculated for that. You want control, not chaos. So let's talk about a middle ground. I walk away. No court. No headlines. No public bloodbath. You return control of Clara Monroe, and I'll sign whatever you want. No contest. You win. I disappear. Let's stop before we both get dragged. Caroline. It was bold. Almost impressive. But also revealing. She thought she still had a lever. She thought she could bargain with something I wanted. That's what did it for me. Because I didn't want Clara Monroe. I didn't need her overpriced sage bundles and smug Instagram quotes. I wasn't trying to run her into the ground. I just wanted her to know what it feels like to build something on a lie and then watch it get peeled away piece by piece. Still, her letter gave me a new idea. Not for peace. For precision. I called her that evening. Calm. Measured. I read your note. And, you're right about one thing, I said. This isn't about hurting you. It's about clarity. She paused. So what are you proposing? Let's meet. Not at the cafe. Somewhere neutral. Public. But not too public. Why? Because I'm going to give you something, I said. And I want to see your face when I do. She agreed. Too quickly. Like a person already convinced they'd turned the tide. We met at the botanical garden. Her suggestion, ironically, said she wanted calm energy. Ironic, considering what was coming. She arrived dressed in soft colors, like she was performing vulnerability. She sat across from me on the iron bench near the glasshouse entrance, just under the awning where the rain couldn't touch us. You said you had something for me, she said. I nodded and handed her a small folder. Inside were 3 documents. The first, transfer of ownership for Clara Monroe back into her name. Her eyes widened. The second, a formal release of all profit claims and brand control. She looked up at me, confused, hopeful. And then the third, a signed, notarized agreement stating she relinquishes all financial claims, current or future, including alimony, assets, and any residual entitlements. Her face fell. I don't understand, she said. You're giving it back? I'm returning what you built. I don't need it. But I'm taking your exit in writing. Permanently. Irrevocably. She stared at the page. You're really just walking away? No, I said, voice calm. I'm setting you free. Exactly like you asked. No safety net. No strings. No second chances. You keep the business. I keep everything else. And if I say no, you won't. Because right now, you're scared. And this is the best offer you're going to get. She swallowed. You could have destroyed me. Not my style. She hesitated, then signed. 3 slow, deliberate strokes of her pen. And just like that, finality. But as she handed it back, she made a mistake. A tiny one. Her phone buzzed on the bench. Reflexively, she turned it face up. The screen lit up. Message from Nils. Just a name. But the font was enough. It wasn't saved like a friend. It was formatted like a secret. I memorized it. Didn't say a word. Didn't flinch. But inside, something twisted. Nils. Not Tony. Not random. Something else. And just like that, I realized. The real story hadn't even started yet. 3 letters. That's all it took. Nils. Not a common name. Not forgettable. And certainly not part of the mythology she'd spun about her search for freedom. The moment that notification lit up her screen, everything shifted. She flinched, not visibly, not enough for a stranger to notice, but I saw it. I cataloged it. Just like she taught me. The next morning, I started digging. Not like a man obsessed. Like a man conducting a quiet autopsy. Because I needed to know what, exactly, had been festering under the surface of our marriage all these years. Caroline had always been meticulous about hiding messes. Emotional, financial, reputational, she scrubbed everything until it sparkled. But people like that? They always miss something. Nils didn't show up in her call logs. Not in her social media. But he did exist in a tucked-away folder in her cloud drive I still had access to because she forgot to revoke permissions after our shared photo archive went digital last year. The folder was labeled Client Materials. Innocent enough. But inside, a single PDF file titled Kite Project, Grant Proposal. 57 pages of psychobabble, holistic wellness rhetoric, and strangely technical vocabulary for someone who still used phrases like Mercury and retrograde in serious conversations. I opened the metadata. Author, Nils Kerwin. And buried in the footnote of page 12, data analysis led by N. Kerwin. Experimental control conducted off-site. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. Experimental control? This wasn't just another spiritual rebound in joggers and mala beads. This was something else. I cross-referenced the name. Nils Kerwin. Age, 45. Dual PhDs, Behavioral Psychology and Strategic Communications. Consultant for Experimental Cognition Studies. Previously worked under a think tank in Seattle that went under investigation for questionable consent practices and participant trials. The kind of man who didn't show up on gym rosters or conference selfies. The kind of man you didn't brag about. The kind you protected. And Caroline? She wasn't just involved. She was co-signing grant documents. She was helping him source data. Except Caroline doesn't do data. Caroline markets it. I sat there staring at the screen, piecing it together. The LLC, the wellness persona, the disappearances, the overnight trips. She wasn't just running off with a new lover. She was embedded in something. And she tried to sell me the image of a bored housewife chasing excitement? No, this wasn't about passion. This was about cover. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then checked it. Hey David, this is probably weird, but I came across your contact through the Clara Monroe archive. I was one of your wife's beta clients. Or, I thought I was. You don't know me, but I think something's wrong. I don't want to say more over voicemail. Please call me back. I replayed it. Beta clients? I called back immediately. She answered on the first ring. Her name was Lindsay. She sounded spooked. She told me she signed up for a program through Caroline's intuitive mapping platform, something vague involving psychological detox and neuropattern rebalancing. It was marketed as a hybrid coaching/therapy/wellness method. She said she paid in full, had one Zoom session with Caroline, and then the follow-up was with a man named Nils. Except it wasn't a session. It was a test. He asked me to recite number sequences under stress, then colors, then smell tests. Then he introduced sound patterns and watched my responses. I thought it was part of some mindfulness technique, but halfway through I realized he was tracking micro-reactions, like biometric stuff. Then the file I was working with disappeared. I never got my results. And Caroline stopped responding. That's when I started reading your name in the ownership records. She sent me a screenshot of the invoice. Clara Monroe Wellness Consulting. Paid via crypto. Description: Cognitive Cleanse Package. Tier 3. Tier 3. How many tiers were there? And how many clients had no idea what they were actually signing up for? This wasn't a yoga grift anymore. It was a lab. And Caroline had been the brand. I sat at my desk, staring at her Instagram profile, the one with her in white linen, laughing in the desert, captioned, "Healing isn't linear." But it's mine. That wasn't healing. That was hiding. And now that I knew the truth, I realized I hadn't taken nearly enough from her. Not yet. There's a specific kind of silence that settles when you realize someone you trusted didn't just betray you. They used you. Not emotionally. Operationally. Caroline hadn't just lied, or cheated, or played house while building an escape hatch. She'd used my money, my surname, and the illusion of our stable marriage as credentials. I wasn't her husband. I was her alibi. And now I knew what she was really selling. She wasn't offering healing. She was collecting data. Over the next 2 days, I went full forensic. I had access to her shared Google Workspace from back when we managed finances together. She never changed the passwords. Classic Caroline. Always assuming the cleanup crew will never look behind the curtain. I found archived spreadsheets marked session debriefs. Dozens of names. Notes like, reacts strongly to olfactory dissonance. Resistance to auditory loops on day 3. Minor somatic feedback with synchronized motion prompts. It read like lab notes. Not therapy. Next to each name, a payment. Most were crypto. Some untraceable gift cards. One stood out. Bank transfer, routed through a Canadian financial services firm. I traced that transaction. It led to a trust account. Under my name. That's when it clicked. Caroline had used one of my old shell trusts, something I set up years ago during a licensing deal, to launder client money through the appearance of a tech startup I once registered and forgot about. She didn't just use me as cover. She used my infrastructure. Now I was tied to it. The cognitive cleanse experiment, the unauthorized biometric collection, the questionable payments from half a dozen countries. I was the paper trail. If someone started pulling threads, my name came up first. Not hers. Not Nils. Mine. I should have been furious. I should have kicked something, called Ron, launched a legal missile across her minimalist loft, and watched her life implode. But I didn't. Because in that moment, something better happened. I realized exactly how to ruin her. Not out of rage, but with elegance. You see, I still had majority control over the Clara Monroe Wellness brand. The temporary transfer of ownership she signed, I never filed it with the state. It was symbolic. A decoy. Legally, the business and its liabilities still belonged to me, which meant I could take the brand in any direction I wanted. So I did. That same night, I called an old acquaintance, Amanda Berenger, PR strategist for a major digital health conglomerate. We dated once. Didn't work out. But she always respected me. And she hated pseudo-spiritual grifters more than she hated wine with a screw top. I pitched her a rebrand. Clara Monroe Wellness goes corporate. Think public accountability. Think scandal detox. A sudden pivot to consumer protection. Amanda didn't hesitate. "If you let me run with this," she said, "I'll turn your wife's cult-light hustle into a case study in ethical intervention." "But David, are you sure you want to drag her publicly?" I didn't answer immediately. Just swirled the drink in my hand and looked out the window at the streetlight humming like it was in on the plan. I want to redefine what ruined looks like. And so it began. The next 48 hours were fire. Amanda moved fast. Press kits. Repositioning statements. The New Clara Initiative. A bold new pivot toward transparency in the wellness industry. We scrubbed every soft focus image of Caroline's face from the homepage. Instead, charts, stats, reports. We published anonymized client logs with redacted names, explicitly outlining the methods used under Caroline's leadership. No accusations, just data transparency. But here's the genius of it. Every single log included timestamps, user permissions, and admin access info. And guess whose name showed up under every access log? Caroline Monroe Hartley. She became the face of the very abuse she tried to cover with sage sticks and affirmations. The blowback began before the weekend was over. Clients started emailing, then DMing, then posting. Caroline's carefully curated followers turned. People she'd ghosted were now resurfacing, screenshots in hand, asking why brainwave sync trials were never disclosed, why smells and sounds were part of a wellness retreat. And the best part? I didn't post a single word. Every scandalous leak came from her own data, her own accounts, her own clients. And when she called me, finally, desperately, Breathless, I didn't answer. Because I was busy. With Nils. It took me less than an hour to find him. Nils Kerwin. Ph.D. 2, actually, as he loved to emphasize in the few academic podcasts he'd graced before disappearing into the wellness shadows. He used to be a rising star in neuromarketing, ran a few studies on behavioral patterning in retail spaces, published some niche papers on sensory conditioning. Then one day, poof, left the institution, walked off the conference circuit, and rebranded himself as a cognitive response architect. Translation: he figured out there was more money in manipulating housewives than peer reviews. But what really got my attention was this: he hadn't disappeared. He'd just gone private. Consulting only. Referral-based. No online booking. No office. But he did have a P.O. box in Montauk and an LLC filed in Delaware. Classic move for someone laundering theory through therapy. I made a call. Ron, who owed me favors stacked like bricks, knew a guy who handled quiet checks. Within 2 hours, I had a hotel confirmation under Nils' alias, Adrian Bloom. He was checked into a boutique spot by the water. Same one Caroline claimed she'd retreated to last spring when she needed to get away and realign. The pieces weren't falling into place. They were slamming. But I didn't go straight to him. That night, I sent a private calendar invite to Caroline. Subject line: closure. She accepted it within 5 minutes. I knew she would. When your brand is crumbling and your phone won't stop buzzing with hashtags you use to control, #wellnessfraud, #clericult, #neuroabuse, you'd do anything to plug the leak. She still believed she could smooth talk her way through this. She didn't know the dam had already burst. We met at her loft. Her sacred little showroom of self-reinvention now looked like a staged crime scene. Crystals shoved in a drawer. Succulents dead. Laptop open on the floor with 12 unread Slack pings and a paused YouTube video titled, "What to Do If Your Business is Publicly Imploding." She looked thinner, worn down. The confident tilt of her head was gone, replaced by a twitchy sort of tension, like she expected betrayal to materialize out of the walls. She tried to open with charm. "I assume you've seen the posts. I don't know what Amanda's told people, but you're trending," I said, taking a slow look around. "Not in the way you usually like." "I can fix it," she said quickly. "But I need access back. Let me back into the back end. I can clarify everything." "Spin it." I pulled a chair from the counter and sat, slowly. "Spin it?" "Caroline, the data logs show you ran multisensory trials without informed consent." "It wasn't like that," she snapped. "Nils, he exaggerated the protocols. It was supposed to be low impact. Surface mapping." I raised an eyebrow. "So you knew he was running trials?" Silence. She bit her lip. "We didn't hurt anyone. David, please. You know me. I'm not a monster. I just got swept up." "He had funding. Real funding." "I thought it was science." She nodded, too fast. "You were in human experiments disguised as therapy. On paying clients. With my name on the legal shell. Do you realize the level of fallout you've invited?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I knew that look. I'd seen it at dinner parties, when she needed someone to step in and defend her from a question she didn't want to answer. It wasn't grief. It was calculation. "There's still a way out of this," she said. "We work together. You spin the narrative. We say you uncovered it. We go public with the initiative. Damage control. We become the whistleblowers." I just stared at her for a beat, then reached into my coat pocket and slid a small black recorder across the counter. Her face dropped. "You've been recording this?" "No," I said. "This is for him." I slid her a printout. Hotel reservation. Alias. P.O. Box. Linked LLC. "I'm meeting Nils tomorrow morning. I thought you should know." She grabbed the paper like it might vanish. Scanned it. "You found him." "Of course I did." Her hands were trembling now. "David, listen to me." He'll spin it. He'll say I masterminded everything. He's done it before. He vanished after the Seattle inquiry. He knows how to erase trails. I'm counting on that. She stared at me. "You don't want justice. You want revenge." "No, Caroline," I said quietly. "I want precision." I stood up, slipping the recorder back into my pocket. "And after tomorrow, you won't have to wonder anymore who gets to control the story." She didn't try to follow me. She just sank into the couch. And for the first time, she looked small in that space she once ruled like a queen. Let her sit in it. "Tomorrow," I was going to meet the ghost she tried to build a future with. And I was bringing a mirror. I didn't dress like a man coming for confrontation. I dressed like a man coming for a negotiation I had already won. Button down, no tie. Neutral jacket. No flash. Nothing that screamed threat. Because men like Nils don't respect emotion. They study it. Weaponize it. You show up angry, and he'll file you under predictable response pattern before you finish your first sentence. That's what Caroline never understood. When you play house with manipulators, you better know which one of you owns the floor plan. The hotel was oceanfront. Minimalist. The kind of place that charges $14 for an herbal tea infusion and offers silent yoga at dawn. I checked in under a different name. Didn't need him knowing I was there. I already knew his room, 410. The concierge said Mr. Bloom liked fresh towels at 9 a.m. and the New York Times delivered to the door. I waited until 9:07, then knocked. Once. Confident. Civil. He opened the door shirtless, coffee in hand, looking vaguely annoyed, until he registered me. Not who he expected. Can I help you? You're Nils, I said, voice level. Or do you prefer Adrian? The change in his face was micro. Eyebrows lowering half a centimeter, shoulders straightening, but I clocked it. This was a man who knew when he'd been found. His poker face was surgical, but I wasn't here to bluff. I think you have the wrong. Caroline says hi. Now he was silent. I waited. 1 Mississippi. 2. David Hartley, I said. Husband. Former, technically. Owner of Clara Monroe Wellness. Still technically. It's complicated. He stepped aside, hesitated, then gestured me in. I suppose you didn't fly all the way out here for tea. I came for clarity. The room was aggressively neutral. White linens, pale wood, an untouched fruit tray that probably cost more than my monthly car insurance. His laptop sat open on the desk behind him, a spreadsheet visible with what looked like coordinates and timestamps. He sat in the armchair. Didn't offer me a seat. I assume you've got something to say, he said flatly. Actually, I said, pulling out the recorder and placing it gently on the table. I'd prefer you talk first. He gave it a glance. No reaction. Just took a slow sip of his coffee and studied me over the rim of the mug. You want a confession, he said. I want the truth. I already know enough. I just need it in your voice. Why? Because Caroline's falling apart, I said calmly. And when people like her start drowning, they grab whatever's closest. And I'm still standing on the dock. That got his attention. She's blaming me, he asked, eyebrows twitching slightly. Not yet, but give it time. She's going to scream her way into martyrdom eventually, and you know it. He set the mug down, finally leaning forward. You think I care what happens to her? I think you care about what happens to you. We sat there in silence, the ocean barely audible behind the thick window glass. He cracked first. You're right, he said. She wasn't supposed to pull in real clients. The beta testing was meant to stay in-house. Volunteers only. But she got greedy. Built the brand too fast. Started pushing the sensory trials into the market without my consent. That's not on me. She used my financial shell, I said. She used me as a liability shield. That's why I left, he snapped. She thought she could run it like a lifestyle blog. Monetize trauma. I told her this wasn't a business. It was a study, but she kept branding it, commodifying it. She's the one who ran the Tier 3 trials publicly. There it was. Tier 3. Out loud. I tapped the recorder. Appreciate the confirmation. He laughed bitterly. What? You're going to take this to the press? Press doesn't care. But regulators do. Lawyers definitely do. You'll bury her too. She already buried herself. He stood, finally losing his cool. You think you're a hero? You think this makes you clean? You enabled her. You funded it. You didn't ask where the money went. You just signed the checks. That landed harder than I expected. Because it wasn't wrong. I stood slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the water, then turned back. I'm not trying to be clean. I'm trying to be accurate. He watched me for a long beat, then said something I didn't expect. She's going to come back to you. That's what they do. When the fire dies down, when the name cools off, she'll pivot to some new identity. And she'll need a bridge. Someone respectable. Someone who once loved her. I didn't respond. Because he was right about that too. I picked up the recorder. Slipped it into my coat. Thanks for the tea, I said, and I left. I didn't look back, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was the spark, and Caroline was already walking into the gasoline. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove 2 hours inland to a little town where nobody cared who Caroline Monroe was, and no one ever heard of Tier 3 cognitive trials. I checked into a bland motel with burnt coffee and silence, exactly what I needed. I wasn't hiding. I was digesting. The recorder sat on the nightstand. I didn't play it again. I didn't need to. Nils had already given me more than words. He'd given me something far better. Leverage. The mistake Caroline made, the one manipulators always make, was assuming the worst thing that could happen was exposure. But exposure's fast, public, loud, and it blows over. Real destruction? It's quiet, surgical. Reputation doesn't burn in flames, it rots in silence. And I was ready to start the rot. That night, I sent 3 emails. All anonymous. All loaded with attachments. The Tier 3 documentation, consent waivers with mismatched signatures, metadata from the sensory trials, and Nils's confession clipped neatly into a 2-minute MP3. Each email went to a different destination. A mid-level compliance officer at the Department of Consumer Protection. A small podcast that specialized in takedowns of the wellness industrial complex. And Amanda, because she knew how to weaponize shame better than any judge. Then I turned off my phone. The next morning, when I powered it back on, there were 7 missed calls from Caroline, 2 voicemails, 3 texts, all within the last hour. David, something's happening online. Where are you? You need to call me back now. I don't know what you did, but it's spreading. This isn't just me anymore. They're saying you were part of it. Do you understand what you've done? Perfect. Let them believe I was involved. Let the wolves circle. Because when they came for her, she'd want to talk. But I wouldn't be there. Instead, I forwarded everything to Ron. Subject line. Time to bury it. Quietly. Ron replied in 15 minutes flat. Understood. She'll be too busy defending herself to go after you. By the time this reaches formal litigation, she'll be radioactive. Give it a week. Stay silent. Keep clean. Let her burn out alone. And so I did. The internet was already doing its part. One of the beta clients Caroline had gaslight, Lindsay, had posted a detailed thread about the psychological manipulation embedded in the sessions. Others followed. Screenshots of Caroline's emails. Voice memos. PDFs. A Reddit post climbed the front page. I paid $1,200 to have my brain rewired. AMA. And the centerpiece of it all? The face of Clara Monroe Wellness, once draped in white linen and serenity. Caroline. People weren't asking if she was guilty anymore. They were asking how long she'd been lying. It didn't take long before she released a statement. I watched the video on mute first, just to see her face. She looked unfinished. Hair not quite styled. Eyes puffy. Voice thinner than usual. She used words like healing and intentions and misunderstandings. She even tried the betrayed by my partner angle. Not naming names, but letting the words do just enough damage. I could almost see her lawyer's fingerprints on the script. But it didn't land. Because behind every word, there was nothing left to sell. And then came the final twist. Buried in a 6-sentence blog post on a low-traffic website tied to the Clara Monroe brand. Effective immediately, we are ceasing all client operations. Clara Monroe Wellness will enter a phase of internal restructuring. The company's founding partner has stepped down. That phrase, founding partner, that was me. But I hadn't stepped down. I had erased the company from within. By revoking its hosting, canceling its merchant accounts, pulling every contract filed under my old trust. Caroline had tried to hijack my name, my assets, and my credibility. So I buried the entire identity she built on top of me. The next morning, I received a single email. No subject line, just one sentence. Please meet me. One last time. I need to explain. I stared at it for a while. I already knew what she'd say. I already knew how it would end. But I replied anyway. 1 hour. Same cafe. Come alone. Because some fires deserve to be watched as they burn themselves out. She was already seated when I walked in. Same cafe where she first handed me the divorce papers. Different atmosphere now. She looked like a guest at her own funeral. No makeup. No jewelry. Hair tied back like she couldn't bear to wear it loose anymore. The corner table she chose faced the wall, not the windows. That was deliberate. The kind of move you make when you're bracing for humiliation and praying it doesn't recognize you. I sat across from her, not saying a word, just watching. She didn't look up right away. She kept stirring her tea, even though the cup was empty. I assume you've seen the fallout, she said eventually. You're trending again, I said. Still not in the way you like. She let out a short, bitter breath. They're saying I ran a cult. Didn't you? No, she snapped, then caught herself. I didn't mean for it to become that. You know what always amazes me? I leaned forward slightly. The way people like you always phrase it that way. Like the fire started itself. Like the matches just happened to be in your hand. She closed her eyes. Just for a second. Then she looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the real version of her. Not the brand. Not the curated softness. The raw, calculating shape underneath. I was good at it, she said quietly. You know I was. Better than I ever was at anything else. I know. And that's what scares me. We sat in that sentence for a moment. No ambient jazz could drown it out. I didn't plan it, she went on. At first, it was just improv. A hustle. But people believed in it. Believed in me. That does something to you. That power. It makes you start believing you're doing something meaningful. Even if you're not. She paused, waiting to see if I'd jump in. I didn't. She leaned forward. I didn't mean to pull you into it, David. I really didn't. But once I realized your name was legally tied to everything, I just froze. I thought I could manage it. Redirect the attention. Protect both of us. No, Caroline, I said slowly. You thought you could protect yourself. A beat of silence. Then I pulled out the envelope I'd brought. The real reason I came. Here, I said, sliding it across the table. Open it. She hesitated, then pulled the flap back. Inside, 3 things. A formal disassociation agreement, releasing me from all involvement in the business retroactively. A full transfer of liability documents, binding her to sole accountability for all wellness practices, client communications, and undisclosed research dating back 3 years. And finally, a letter. Not from me. From Lindsay. A raw, brutal, handwritten letter. No lawyers. No edits. Just a client laying out, in painful, honest prose, what Caroline's program did to her mental health. The aftermath. The shame. The sense of being experimented on without consent. Caroline's hands trembled as she finished reading. For once, she didn't try to speak. You sign those, I said calmly. And you can go. I won't speak your name again. I won't file anything else. You can disappear into whatever desert you want. She looked up at me, blinking. And if I don't? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. Set it beside the envelope like a quiet threat. That goes to every ethics board, health department, and investigative reporter in the state. She stared at the flash drive like it had fangs. You recorded him. Nils. I said. Of course. You wanted excitement, Caroline. You got espionage. She didn't say anything. Just sat back. Distant. Like she was trying to time travel her way out of this moment. I never thought it would end like this, she murmured. That's the problem with you, I said, standing. You always forget how things end. You only ever see the part where people watch you. I walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Because the truth was, she would sign. Not because she believed in redemption, but because she finally understood. Words and arrows, once fired, never return. And I hadn't just fired one. I'd made sure she couldn't pull it out. It was 2:14 a.m. when the email hit my inbox. Subject line. Signed. I'm done. Please destroy the flash drive. Attached were the PDFs, all properly signed, notarized digitally through some online service. She hadn't scrawled a message. Not even a postscript. No apology. No thank you. No final plea for grace. Just the paperwork. Just the cleanup. It should have felt like closure. But I couldn't sleep. Because something was still wrong. I sat on the edge of the bed, flipping that flash drive between my fingers, thinking. About Lindsay. About the smell tests. About the folder labeled Kite Project, grant proposal. And about one particular phrase Nils had let slip when I visited him. She's the one who ran the Tier 3 trials publicly. But I'd only found a dozen clients. I pulled out my laptop and opened the metadata from the beta logs again. Buried deep in the revision history of a spreadsheet, version 4.7, edited months ago, I found a tab that had been hidden, not deleted. A list of non-consensual field subjects. There were hundreds. Not paying clients. Participants. Logged by IP address, time of engagement, behavioral triggers. They'd been pulled from browser-based interaction data. Caroline, or Nils, had embedded silent data scripts on wellness articles hosted under her brand. People thought they were reading about mindfulness or stress relief. Meanwhile, they were being subjected to tone modulation, light pulse sequences, even mild visual distortions. A soft A/B test for neurological reaction. And I was still the registered owner. My name was listed as the admin publisher of the site that hosted the scripts. I froze. The plan had been to walk away clean. Force her to take the heat, disappear, move on. But I couldn't. Because even if she signed the disassociation, the trail didn't stop there. That digital shell, the company, the domain, the structure, was still tied to me. If someone decided to trace the scripts, if they connected those IP logs to regulatory violations or privacy abuse, it wouldn't be her they'd come for. It would be me. Unless I turned the tables completely. So I made one last call. To Nils. He didn't pick up at first. But by the third try, he answered, barely awake, voice groggy. You got what you wanted, he said. Why are you still calling me? Because I'm not finished, I replied. You lied. I lied about a lot of things, he said. You'll have to narrow it down. You said she ran the Tier 3 trials publicly. You never said there were unauthorized field scripts. That's federal. That's violation level federal. Silence. Tell me you didn't code that. He sighed. David. Look. I built the framework. But she deployed it. She wanted data that couldn't be manipulated. Organic responses. Her idea. She said people don't reveal truth under observation. They reveal it when they think they're alone. I clenched my jaw. You're saying my wife deployed illegal cognitive tracking tools on unsuspecting web traffic for psychometric analysis, and you're pinning the whole thing on her. I'm not pinning anything, he replied. I'm just telling you the truth. You wanted excitement? You married a pioneer. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not with fear. With clarity. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't about love or infidelity or humiliation anymore. Caroline hadn't fallen into something. She had built it from the ground up, with me as her foundation. And then she left me not to chase freedom, but to shed liability. She'd handed me divorce papers so I'd stop asking questions. She thought she could time it, dissolve the marriage right before the brand scaled. And when it crashed, she'd already be clear. Let David take the hit. He signed the trust. He owns the tech. He was too boring to notice. No. No more. So I wrote one final message. I didn't send it to her. I sent it to Amanda, along with the remaining logs. New angle. The face of a wellness brand that secretly experimented on readers. The story isn't over. She didn't just manipulate her clients. She used her husband as a firewall. I knew Amanda. She'd leak it. She wouldn't mention me. Just the betrayal. Just the data. Let the world see what Caroline had built behind the curtain without me having to say a single word. I leaned back in the chair. Watched the cursor blink on the empty email draft. Then, slowly, I opened a new one. To Caroline. No subject. No message. Just an attachment. A photo. From our 3rd anniversary. She's laughing, glass in hand, eyes closed. And in the background, blurred, barely visible, is me. The man she built everything on. The ghost she tried to erase. I had sinned. Let her feel what it's like to be observed without consent. Only one part left. And she still doesn't know. I haven't even told her the worst part yet. She called the moment she saw the photo. No words in the voicemail. Just her breathing, shallow and uneven. Like the realization had finally reached bone. She knew. She knew I knew everything. Not just the schemes. Not just the trials. She knew I saw the design. The entire system she thought she built behind my back. She built it on top of me. And now it was crumbling. Publicly. Permanently. Her brand was done. Amanda's expose hit that morning. No names redacted. Nothing softened. The Wellness Widow. How one woman built a secret psychology lab using her husband's infrastructure. 32 pages. Sourced. Dated. Verified. Caroline wasn't a cautionary tale anymore. She was a case study. Even her apologies couldn't find footing. She tried to post a tearful video. No filter this time. No crystals in the background. But the comments didn't bite. Every word she spoke was thrown back at her with time-stamped receipts. Clients. Partners. Readers. Even the hosts who ran her podcast tours turned on her. Her inbox wasn't filled with sympathy. It was filled with lawsuits. And she had no shield left. Because I'd taken it. When the wellness site came down, I archived everything. All logs, all sessions, all the source code. But I never handed it to authorities. I handed it to Ron. And Ron didn't leak it. He licensed it. The protocols, stripped of Caroline's fingerprints, anonymized, cleaned, legally distanced, were repackaged for academic research under Ron's private consulting arm. All residual gains, redirected through the trust that still bore my name. Not hers. For the first time, she built something, and I got to sell it. I gave her a product, wrapped in silence, labeled, "You wanted excitement?" It paid for my next house. When she finally showed up at my door, 6 weeks after the storm had broken, shoes dusty, eyes hollow, I didn't say a word. I just let her stand there. On the porch of a home she didn't recognize. On land she thought I'd never leave. "David," she said softly, "can we talk?" I looked at her for a long time, and then said, "You still think we're in the same chapter?" She swallowed. "I never meant for it to go this far." "No," I said, stepping outside, letting the door swing gently closed behind me. "You meant for me to never notice. That's not the same thing." She looked down, voice barely a whisper. "You took everything." I nodded once. "You don't get to fire a weapon and then cry about the recoil." I thought maybe. She didn't finish the sentence. I waited, just to see if she would. She didn't. So I handed her a plain white envelope. Inside, one sheet of paper. A signed NDA. Final. Absolute. It came with a payout. Enough to survive, not enough to rebuild. Condition: she never uses my name again. Not online. Not in conversation. Not even in therapy. She signed without reading. As she turned to walk back down the steps, she paused. "Were you always like this?" I didn't answer right away. Just stared past her at the street. Then, calmly, I said, "You wanted someone with fire. You should have checked which direction the wind was blowing." She left. No hug. No storm off. No last-minute tears. Just quiet footsteps. That was the last time I saw her. She exists now in headlines, buried in page 5 articles about psychological consent and the ethics of influence. Her name trends once in a while, sometimes for the wrong reasons. Sometimes because someone finds the old footage and asks, "Whatever happened to her?" The answer's always the same. She mistook the architect for the foundation, and she never saw the collapse coming until the walls were already gone.